A young man drops a pair of gloves at his feet and tells him he's going down in front of his daughter. 40 neighbors. Nobody moves. 4 phones already recording, raised before a word was spoken, because somebody knew exactly how this was supposed to end. 3 years he's said nothing, absorbed everything, the broken phone. His dead garden kicked apart. His daughter's hand torn open on concrete. Nobody on that street knows what his hands did for a living. They're about to. And when the video hits the internet, 4 seconds will be missing. The 4 that prove he was walking away. He reaches for his shirt collar. The gloves landed in the grass an inch from his boot. Red leather, scuffed at the knuckles, still warm from somebody's hands. Silas Dupree did not look down at them. He looked at the young man's wrists instead, at the tendons standing up under the skin, at the way the weight had already shifted onto the ball of the left foot, which meant the right one was coming, which meant this had been decided somewhere else hours ago, in a room Silas had never been invited into. Behind him, a folding table held a bowl of macaroni salad and a stack of paper plates weighted down the river rock. Behind that, 40-some neighbors had gone quiet all at once, the way a room goes quiet when the phone rings at 2 in the morning. Somebody's speaker was still playing. Nobody turned it on. "I'm going to put you flat on this grass," the young man said, "in front of your daughter." And Silas heard the sentence. He heard every word of it. But what he was actually hearing was a sound from 18 years ago, a small one. The kind of sound that arrives before everything else in a man's life gets divided into before and after. 40 people stood on that green. Not one of them knew that the quiet man who fixed their gutters had once held the lives of 11 other men in his 2 hands for the length of a single afternoon. And not one of them could understand why he was standing there, doing nothing, saying nothing, letting it happen. His daughter was 20 feet away with a paper cup in her hand. He could have ended it in 4 seconds. He didn't. 4 months earlier. The moving trucks came on a Thursday in the first week of May. 2 of them, which the block noticed because the Farrells had left with 1, and the Farrells had 4 kids. The house was the corner lot. Big yard. New siding, a stone mailbox that had been there since 1978 and that nobody on Marlow Crossing was allowed to touch, which was not a rule anybody had written down and was a rule everybody knew. Silas Dupree was on his porch when the second truck pulled up. He watched the way he watched most things, sideways, with maybe a tenth of himself, which was, in fairness, more than most people bring to anything. 2 men in the cab, the older one driving, and the older one got out and did something Silas had not seen a person do in a long time. He worked the block, not visited, not introduced himself, worked it. Porch to porch, hand out, name first, 1 beat of eye contact and then a joke, and by the time he was 3 houses in, he was already using what he'd learned at House 1. Silas watched him get to the Kowalczyk place. 4 minutes. Then the Bell House. 6. Then Loretta Pike's front steps, and there he stayed for 11 minutes with Loretta Pike, who had lived on Marlow Crossing for 22 years, who had buried a husband and raised 2 sons and sat on the zoning board through 6 of the worst years in its history, who had once told a man from the county to take his clipboard and go stand in traffic. Loretta Pike laughing, with her hand flat on her chest. Silas thought, mildly, nothing that big. Just the small mechanical sound tension makes me catch ya. He came up the Dupree driveway around 4. "Hollett's Treadway," he said, with his hand already over the rail. "Silas Dupree. He said it back like he was filing it somewhere. "You're the one with the lilacs. Those are my wife's. She around? I want to steal her opinion on a hedge." She passed. Hollis Treadway did not flinch and did not overdo it, and Silas noticed it's because most people did one or the other. Hell. He took his hand off the rail. "I'm sorry. That's a rough thing to walk into on a Thursday. It was 3 years ago. Doesn't matter what year it was, which was annoyingly correct. 58, give or take. Silver, thick through the chest, wearing the kind of quarter zip that cost $80 and is cut to look like it cost 30. Handshake dry. Eyes that went across a porch and priced everything on it. They talked about the water pressure on the block. They talked about the storm drain of Delancey that flooded every April and the 6 years of emails Loretta Pike had sent about it. What do you do, Silas? Safety compliance. Contract work. Government. Some. Good. Hollis nodded, slow. Man ought to have a boring job. I run trucks. Freight. Which is a boring job that keeps you up at night. And that's the worst kind there is. That right. Every load is a lawsuit waiting on weather, he said, and laughed and knocked the rail twice with his knuckles, and went on down the line to the next house. Silas stood there a minute after he'd gone. Then he went inside and washed a pan that was already clean. Marlowe Crossing knew Silas Dupree the way a street knows a man who has never once given it a reason to look twice. He was the one who fixed the Kowalczyk gutter without being asked, who kept a snowblower and used it on 4 driveways besides his own, who nodded, who waved, who said good morning in a voice that never got louder than good morning needed to be. 44 years old, 6'1", built like a man who worked at it and never brought it up. Gray coming in at the temples in a way his wife had called distinguished, and he had called Tuesday. A black man in his mid-40s, widower, raising a daughter, doing some kind of paperwork job out of a home office with a door that stayed shut. That was the whole file the neighborhood had on him, and it was accurate, as far as it went. What Marlowe Crossing did not have was the rest. They didn't know he took the seat with his back to the wall in every restaurant, every time, without deciding to. That he could tell you where the exits were in the grocery on Delancey, and the pharmacy on Route 9, and the waiting room at the dentist, and that he had never once gone looking for them on purpose. They didn't know he slept about 4.5 hours and always had, or that he had spent 18 years in the Navy, and that for 11 of those years his job had been to walk toward the thing everyone else was running from, and kneel down beside it and use his hands. 3 deployments he was not permitted to describe. Not to a neighbor, not to a reporter, not to his own child. He came home with a rebuilt left shoulder, a hearing loss in the high registers he had never let anybody write down, and a way of being that stopped being a skill somewhere along the line and started being a person. He ran the same 4 miles every morning, down Marlowe to Delancey, left at the water tower, past the shuttered feed store that had been a Pilates studio and then a vape shop and then nothing at all. Back up the long hill, everybody on the block complained about in winter. He did not listen to music while he ran. He had tried it once, the first spring after. Delphine's old playlist, the one with too much Al Green on it. He had made it half a mile before he had to stop on the sidewalk in front of a stranger's house and put his hands on his knees and breathe like a man who had just been hit. So. At 6, he was back. At 6:30, he was on the porch with a cup of coffee that he would set down on the rail and forget about. Every single morning, without fail, until it went cold and skinned over, and he poured it into the hydrangeas. Delphine used to laugh at him for that. 22 years of marriage, and the woman never got tired of the joke. You know they make cups that keep it hot, baby, see? They sell them at the store. Regular store. You've been. She'd say it while braiding her hair, while hunting for her keys, while halfway out the door with a travel mug in her hand, holding up the exact object she was describing, like evidence in a trial he was losing. He still forgot the coffee, which was, he had decided somewhere in the 2nd year, a kind of church. Rosalind came down at 7:10 with her hair wrapped and a nursery apron over one shoulder and the face of a person who had already lost an argument with an alarm clock. 19 years old. 2nd semester at the community college over in Ashgrove. 12 credits and a part-time job at Bellad Hollow Garden Center, where she had gotten very good very fast at telling women 3 times her age that, no, ma'am, that will not survive in full shade, I promise you, I'm sorry. She had her mouth and her father's stillness, and she had worked out, somewhere around 14, that the stillness knots was same thing as calm. You made eggs, I made eggs. You never make eggs on a Tuesday. It's a Tuesday with eggs. She sat down. Ate about 6 bites. Watched him over the rim of her cup with an attention he pretended not to notice. Dad, you were up at 3. 3:30. That's a distinction. That's a difference of 30 minutes. No, she set the cup down. That's you making a distinction. That's the whole thing you do. And he's almost said something. He got as far as opening his mouth. He got as far as the shape of the first word, which would have been baby, which would have been the start of something true. Then the coffee maker made a noise, and the moment turned over. Your tire's low, he said. Front left. Rosalind looked at him for a beat longer than the sentence deserved. Okay, she said. She rinsed her plate, got her keys. At the door she stopped and did the thing she'd been doing since she was small, the little double tap on the doorframe with 2 fingers. It had started as a game with her mother, and had turned into something else after, and in 3 years, neither of them had ever once named it out loud. Then she was gone, And Silas stood in his kitchen with a pan in his hand and thought clearly in words the way you'd read something off a page. You had it right there. The office was the second bedroom, bookshelf, 2 monitors, a window that faced the fence, a 4-drawer cabinet with a lock he actually used, because his clearance required it, and because habits like that do not ask a man whether he still needs them. On paper, he was a contract safety investigator for a federal oversight board that reviewed carriers bidding on Department of Defense freight work. In practice, it meant this. When a trucking company wanted to move sensitive cargo on government timelines and government money, somebody had to look at that company's guts, their maintenance program, their drug testing, their crash history, their driver hours. Whether the safety officer listed on the paperwork was a real human being with a real desk, or a cousin who had been handed $400 to sign something. Somebody's to be the man who said no. Silas was good at it for the same reason he had been good at the other thing, because he did not get bored, because he could look at a page of numbers for 6s without his mind sliding off it. Because when every person in a room wanted a thing to be fine, he could still see the place where it was not. He unlocked the second drawer, file TCL 11147, an interstate, late morning in March, a tractor trailer coming down a 6% grade with 41,000 pounds behind it. Brake failure, not the dramatic kind, the boring kind. The kind that comes from slack adjusters out of spec and a set of shoes that should have been replaced 2 inspections back. The truck went into the median and then onto its side and slid 180 feet. The driver lived. That was the sentence in the report. The driver survived with serious injury, which is how you write down a broken back if you are writing for it for a file. 51 years old, 26 years behind a wheel, clean record, never a preventable, never a positive. Wendell Pryor. Silas had the name and a case number and a corporate designation he did not yet have a face for, because the parent listed on the front page was a holding entity at a registered agent's address, and the operating name underneath it was one he had not gotten to yet. He had gotten as far as the maintenance logs, which arrived from counsel in a banker's box. 11 months of them, tabbed, organized, complete. Except the 3 days before the crash were not in there. Not redacted, not withheld under a claim of privilege, which would at least have been a decision somebody had to put a name on. Just missing. 3 pages. Gone in a way you could shrug at. Silas put a sticky note on the lid of the box and wrote 1 word on it. 3. Then he sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a while. Because a company that hides something on purpose has a problem you can work with. There's a shape to it. There's a person who decided. A capaces license Linux Cygnus by light reliably always on the days it matters is not a problem. That's a culture. That's something that has been growing in the dark for years, being watered by somebody. And a man in a wheelchair somewhere is the harvest. He did not have the name of the company yet. He would have it in 6 weeks, and he would have to say it out loud across his own back fence. The son's name of the second truck, 22. 6 feet even, maybe 210 pounds, and every ounce of it deliberate. Neck like a fire hydrant. He walked with his elbows a little out from his body, the way men walk when they have been told their whole lives to fill a doorway. Brennan Treadway, amateur mixed martial arts. 11-2. A regional sponsorship from a supplement company that had put his face on a gym in Ashgrove and was watching, quietly, to see whether the young man could get through 18 months without generating a headline. And he was, and this is the part that mattered, genuinely good, not gym strong, not internet tough, trained. Silas could see it in the first 90 seconds, from a porch, at 40 yards, watching the kid carry a mattress, because of how he squatted to pick it up, because of where his hips went, because when the mattress swung out and shifted, he corrected with his feet instead of his back, and that is not a thing a person does naturally. That is a thing somebody drills into you for 4 years. Somebody had put a lot of hours into that young man. And somebody, possibly the same somebody, had never once sat him down and explained what to do with himself on a day when there was nobody to hit. That part Silas could see too. It took about a week. It started small. It always does. The truck in front of the Dupree mailbox, not blocking the driveway, blocking the mailbox, which means the carrier will not stop, which means a trip to the post office, which is 40 minutes, twice in 6 days. Then not late, not even that loud, just constant. From the garage they had converted, with the door up, from 4 in the afternoon until 7 at night. Every day, the same 40 seconds of the Ace 8 songs over and over because he was cutting them for something. Then the thing on the sidewalk. Rosalind came home from the garden center on a Wednesday, with dirt to her elbows and a flat of coreopsis in her arms. Brenton was in the driveway with 2 friends from the gym, and Silas, from the porch, heard exactly one sentence of what the young man said as his daughter walked past. It was not shouted. It was not a slur. It was a comment about her body, delivered at conversational volume, with the flat confidence of a man who already knows a girl is going to keep walking. Rosalind kept walking. She got to the porch. Set the flat back one. Ross's. I didn't hear it, Rosalind. Dad. She picked the flat back up. I didn't hear it. She went inside. Silas stood on his own porch with his hands loose at his sides and his heart exactly where it had been 90 seconds before, because his heart rate did what he told it to do and always had. And he thought about how much of his life he had spent being proud of that. Then he went inside, too. He did not cross the street. Because the thing about a man who has been trained not to react is that the training does not come with a manual for when to stop. There is no page in there that says this one, though. There is only the discipline, sitting exactly where the reaction used to be, doing its job perfectly forever. The phone happened on the last Friday in May. Rosalind was in the driveway, washing her car. A little gray Corolla with 140,000 miles on it and a dent in the rear quarter panel from a shopping cart at the Kroger in Ashgrove. Music through the open window, low, barely reaching the sidewalk. Silas was at the kitchen sink. He had maybe 60% of the driveway in view. He saw Brennan come across the grass, saw him reach through the open window, saw the small snap of the wrist as the volume knob came off in his hand. Silas was already moving. By the time he had the side door open, he could hear it. It breaks my concentration, your concentration. I train in the morning. It's 4 in the afternoon. Then I train at 4. Then you can train at 4 with music on, Rosalind said. That's a thing that's allowed. Brennan smiled, and then he took the phone out of her hand. Not grabbed. Took. 2 fingers. Easy, the way you take a menu from a waiter. Because he had decided in advance that she was going to let him, and she had not been given a vote. He turned and threw it into the street. It skipped once on the asphalt and landed face down by the storm drain. Silas crossed the yard. He did not run. He walked at the speed a man walks at, and it took 11 seconds. And inside those 11 seconds, Brenton Treadway said that the thing that Silas I would still be able to quote in October, in a room with bad carpet, with a recorder running. You need to learn your place, he told her, before you get yourself into something you're not ready for. Silas reached the street. He picked up the phone. The screen was cracked corner to corner in a spiderweb, but it lit when he pressed it. He walked back up the driveway, put it in his daughter's hand, closed her fingers around it. Then he turned around. 2 things. Brennan's chin came up. 1, you don't touch anything on this property that isn't yours. That includes the property line, everything past it, and everything my daughter is holding. Or what? 2, Silas kept going as though the question had not happened, which was worse. You apologize to her. Then you go home. Or what, though? And here is what Brenton Treadway did. He stepped in. He did the thing he had been taught to do inside a cage, which is close the distance without telegraphing, because distance is how you make a man understand how much smaller his world just got. He came to about 10 inches. Silas did not move. Not because he decided not to, because there was nothing in him that wanted to, because his hands were already exactly where they needed to be. Hanging, open, unremarkable, because his weight was already on the outside of his left foot, because his eyes had already gone from the young man's face down to a point on the sternum, where you can watch a shoulder and a hip at the same time. Nobody standing in that driveway could have told you a single piece of that was happening. 2 men close together, one of them talking. My dad says you're some kind of desk guy, Brennan said. Compliance. You do paperwork? Some of it's paperwork. You spend your whole life inside a house, and you're going to tell me what to do. I asked you to apologize to my daughter. I could finish this in 1 shot. Silas looked at him and said nothing, which is the part that came apart in the young man's hands. Because Brennan waited. He waited for the flare, or the step back, or the raised voice, or the joke, or any of the 11 things a man does when another man says that to him in his own driveway. And what he got was a man breathing normally. looking at him with an expression of mild professional patience, like a mechanic waiting for you to finish describing a noise. Brennan laughed. He turned to his friends and laughed too loud, and said something about it not being worth it, and walked back across the grass with his shoulders a-rolling. And the entire way Silas watched his hands. Rosalind said, "Dad, it's handled. Dad, he took it's handled, baby." She stood there with a cracked phone in her fist and a hose still running behind her, and she looked at her father for a long moment. Then she nodded once and went inside without saying anything at all, which was new. That night, she sat on her bed with the door shut and made a folder on the damaged phone. She named it something boring. Receipts. Into it went a photo of the cracked screen with the timestamp still on it. A photo of the volume knob which she had found in the grass by the hose reel. A voice memo she recorded of herself, flat factual, no crying, stating the date and the time and exactly what had been said and who had been standing where. Then she went back through 6 weeks of messages from people she'd gone to high school with and found 4 screenshots of things Brennan Treadway had posted that had been sent to her as jokes, and she saved those too. She did not tell her father, for a reason she could have explained if anybody had asked, and nobody did. Because she had grown up in a house where the way you handled a hard thing was to fold it very small and put it somewhere and say it's handled. She had learned that from a man she loved more than anyone alive, and she had learned it completely. On a Tuesday evening in the middle of June, Silas Dupree found out who his neighbor was. It happened at the fence, which is where these things happen. He was out with the pruners because one of the lilacs had thrown a sucker out the bottom, and Delphine had a rule about suckers that he still followed 3 years later without examining why. Warm evening. Light going gold. Some study 2 streets over running a mower they should have run 3 hours earlier. Hollis came out with 2 beers and set one on the rail without asking. Long one? Long month. Hollis drank, wiped his mouth with the back of his wrist. You ever have a business, Silas? Don't. Noted. Hollis laughed. It was a good laugh. That was the thing about the man. It was a genuinely good laugh. And it made you want to say the next thing. And Silas had known men like that in the service and had watched what they could do to a room in 90 seconds. I've got a fleet, Hollis said. 91 trucks. You know what that is? That's non-lawsuits driving around in the rain at 62 miles an hour with my name painted on the door. That's a way to look at it. It's the only way to look at it, brother. That's the whole job. He turned the bottle around in his hand. Had a bad one back in March. Silas's pruners close us on a stem. Grade coming down out of the hills. Truck went over on its side. Hollis blew out air. Driver's 26 years with me. 26 years. No seatbelt violation, nothing. And he's laid up. Lawyers are on it. My carrier's on it. There's some finding coming down about the brake system that I do not care for, and my counsel tells me it's manageable. And I have been in this long enough to know that when a lawyer says manageable, he means expensive. He drank again. Anyway, that's my month. And Silas Dupree stood very still on the other side of his own fence, because there is a feeling that happens when 2 things that have been living in separate rooms of your life walk through the same door at the same time. It is not a thought. It's physical. It's a drop. March, grade, 26 years. A finding on the brake system. T-Kill 147, T-Kill, Treadway, Cartage, and Logistics. He had the box in the second drawer of a locked cabinet 40 feet from where he was standing. He had that man's medical summary. He had the photographs of the median and the 180 feet of torn earth. He had a sticky note with the word 3 written on it in his own handwriting, and he had, right in front of him, in an $80 quarter zip, holding a beer, the man he had been about to spend 6 months quietly taking apart. Here is what Silas did. He finished the cut. He set the pruners down on the rail, blades closed, the way you do. That's a hard thing to carry, he said. It is. 26 years is a career. It's a life, Hollis said. And for 1 second there was something underneath the voice that sounded like it might have been real, and Silas filed that too. Then Hollis Treadway looked at him. Half a second. Maybe less. Because Silas had been a beat slow. Not slow the way a normal man is slow. Slow by his own standard. A pause of maybe 4/10 of a second between the end of Hollis's sentence and the start of his own, in a conversation where every other exchange had come back instantly. 4/10 of a second, that was all Silas gave him. But Hollis Treadway had spent 35 years reading rooms for a living, and reading rooms for a living means you do not need much. His eyes went across Silas's face. Once. You all right? Long day myself. Hollis picked up the second beer, the untouched one, put it back in his own hand, and that small motion said a thing that neither of them acknowledged. Well, he said, evening, Silas. Evening. Silas went in. He shut the door. He did not turn on the kitchen light. He stood in his own dark kitchen with both hands flat on the counter and his heart going at about 90, which had not happened to him in an operational context in a decade, and had now happened to him standing next to a bag of bread. Then he went to the office, unlocked the drawer, pulled the box, went past the medical summary, past the driver's statement he had read 4 separate times, all the way to the front page, to the section he had skimmed in April, because corporate structure is the least interesting part of any of it. Registered parent, registered agent, and beneath it, in 8-point type, the operating name, Treadway, Cartage and Logistics, LLC. Principal, H.R. Treadway. He read it twice. Then he set the page down. And Silas Dupree did something he had not done since the second week after the funeral, which was down on the floor of a room in his own house. Not because of the coincidence. Coincidence he could handle. He had lived an entire life full of coincidence, some of it fatal. He sat down because 6 weeks. 6 weeks of that man's hand on his fence rail. 6 weeks of hello. 6 weeks of a good laugh over a good beer at the hour when the light comes in gold. And on every one of those days, there had been a broken man in a rented ground-floor apartment somewhere, who woke up in the morning and had to think about how he was going to get to the bathroom. Silas had been sociable with that. Not knowing is not a sin. He had sat in enough rooms with enough chaplains to have heard that sentence said kindly by people who meant it. It sat as him anyway, all night. And at 3:30 he was awake in the dark with his shoulder aching the way it did before weather. He filed at 8:41 the next morning, not because he had to think about it, because the office did not open until 8:30. The form was called an ARC 14, Actual and Apparent Conflict Disclosure. Silas had filled out 4 of them in 6 years. A cousin's husband who turned up at a carrier in his 2nd year. A company that turned out to own a warehouse he had once walked through. That kind of thing. You disclose, you recuse. Somebody else picks up the file. The system exists precisely so that a man in his position never has to be alone in a room with a decision like this one. He wrote it plain. Subject of active review, TKIL 147, Principal H.R. Treadway, took residence at the property adjacent to my own on or about May 7. I have had 6 or more conversations of all nature with the subject principal, none concerning the review, prior to identifying him. I request immediate recusal and reassignment. He read it over. Then he added one line. I have a 19-year-old daughter living at this residence. He looked at that sentence for a while before he sent it, because it was true, and because it was relevant, and because some part of him already understood that he was putting it in there as genuine, which is not a thing he would have called honest if somebody else had done it. He sent it anyway. Then he went out to the porch with a cup of coffee, and forgot about it, and poured it into the hydrangeas at 10. The answer took 9 days. 9 days in which the block had a graduation party at the Kowalczyk house and a small emergency involving a burst pipe at the rental 2 doors down, which Silas fixed at 11 at night with a wrench and a length of PEX for a couple who tried to pay him and could not. 9 days in which Brennan Treadway did absolutely nothing. That was the part Silas noticed. Because Brennan Treadway was not a young man with an off switch, and for 9 days he had one. No truck at the mailbox, no music past 6, nothing on the sidewalk. Twice, Silas caught him looking over from the driveway with an expression that was almost thoughtful. Once, the kid raised a hand. Silas raised one back, and thought, in a way he would coax back to later with something close to disgust. Maybe his father talked to him. Maybe that's all it was. The call came on a Thursday at 2:15 in the afternoon. His program manager had a voice like a woman reading a menu she had already made her mind up about. Silas had spoken to her maybe 11 times in 6 years and had never once heard her raise it. Silas, ma'am, your 14 came back. All right, it's denied. He waited. Silas, I'm here. Do you want the outcome or reasoning? Both. Outcome first. Cum is you keep the file. Full authority. No modification to scope, no modification to timeline. Your report is due on the original date. He texted Sreenders to his chair, looked out the window at the fence, at 22 feet of lilac, half of it done blooming, going brown at the tips the way it does in late June. Reasoning, he said. Reasoning is a memo I am going to send you, but I will give you the short version, because you are going to want to argue with the long one. Paper sound. Assignment date on TCL 1147 was April 2nd. Subject principal took residence adjacent to your property on May 7th. 35 days later. I know when he moved in. Then you already see it. He did. He had seen it, actually. Somewhere around day 4 of the 9. And he had put it down and walked away from it and had not picked it back up because he had not wanted to. Say it anyway. Fine. Her voice went at half a degree flatter, which was what she did when she was about to say something she believed. If this board grants recusal on a conflict that the regulated party created after assignment, then every carrier in this country learns the same trick on the same afternoon. Don't like your investigator? Find out where he lives. Buy the house next door. Join his church. Join his gym. Take a table at his wife's charity. That's a policy argument. It is the policy argument, Silas. It is the only one there is. The disqualifying conflict has to come before the assignment. Or it isn't a conflict, it's a TRAT strategy, and if he didn't do it on purpose, then he has had bad luck, and you have got a hard 6 months. Silas rubbed his eyes. There's more, she said. Go ahead. Treadway's counsel filed a motion to disqualify you, came in Monday. On what basis? Undisclosed proximity to the principal creating an appearance of bias. She let it sit for exactly 1 second, which is word for word your own 14. Filed 9 days after yours, by a lawyer who could not possibly have known you had filed one because those are not public. Silas sat forward. Denied, she said. Same day. Same reasoning, running the other direction. Their principal moved in after assignment, so their principal created the proximity, so their principal does not get to profit from it. Ma'am, I know. He filed 9 days after me. I know what he did. That means he went looking. That is what it means. Yes, Silas stood up and walked to the window, 22 feet of lilac and a man's house on the other side of it. Then he knows. Then he knows that I know. Silas. She paused, and when she came back, there was something in her voice that was not procedural at all. Document everything. Not for the file. For you. I'm aware of the exposure. I know you're aware. I am saying it out loud anyway, because you are the kind of man who believes that being aware of a thing is the same as being protected from it. It is not. I have watched that end careers. He almost laughed. That's a hell of a read for 11 phone calls. It's 12 now, she said, and hung up. Here is what Silas understood, standing at that window with the phone still in his hand. He understood that he was locked to this. Both of them were. The fence was going to stay exactly where it was, and so was he. He understood that Hollis Treadway had run his name, and he understood one more thing, which came to him slowly over the next hour, while he made a sandwich he did not eat. That a man like Hollis Treadway, facing a finding he could not fight on the merits, and there were no merits, there were 3 missing pages, and a man in a chair, had exactly 1 play left on the board. You cannot beat a report by arguing with it, but you can beat it by breaking the person who wrote it. You get that investigator on video. You get him with his hands on somebody. You get him raising his voice 1 time on 1 phone in front of witnesses. And then you take those 30 seconds and you staple them to a filing and you use the word temperament and the whole thing goes to another desk and the clock resets. And clocks are money. You don't need him gone. You need him to make 1 mistake in public. Silas stood in his kitchen and put that together piece by piece. And when it was finished, he did not fight it. He felt something worse, which was recognition. Because he had spent 11 years around men who understood that the cheapest way in the world to disarm a device is to get somebody else to pick it up. The giant days of quiet ended that Saturday. The truck came back to the mailbox. The music came back up 2 notches from where it had been in May and ran from 3 until 8. And on Sunday night at 9 o'clock, one of the gym friends stood on the sidewalk directly across from the Dupree porch for 11 minutes, doing nothing at all, not filming. Silas checked. The screen was dark the whole time, just standing there, holding a phone, where a man on a porch could see him holding it. Silas went inside and locked the door and stood in the dark hallway for a second. Then he said, out loud, to nobody, in a house where his daughter was upstairs with headphones on, "All right." The last thing that happened in June happened at the mailbox. Friday morning, 6:50. Silas had come back from his run and gone down the driveway for the paper, and Hollis Treadway was already out there at the stone mailbox with a travel mug and a folded section of newspaper under his arm. like a man who had been waiting a while and wanted it to look like an accident. Silas. Hollis, you run every morning. That's discipline, Hollis drank. I walk. Doctor's orders. Walking's what they give you when they've given up on you. Silas pulled his mail out. 2 bills and a nursery catalog with his daughter's name on it. Your girl, Hollis said. Rosalind, right? Silas closed the mailbox. That's right. She's over at Ashgrove, the community college. She is good school. My sister's boy went there before he transferred. He nodded to himself. What's she taking? Horticulture. Some general ed. Horticulture. Hollis smiled. Well, she has got the hands for it from the look of that yard. That's her mother's. Sure it is. A car went by. Somebody's sprinkler kicked on down the block. Ashgrove's what? 25 minutes? Hollis said. That's the drive out Delancey, past the water tower. Silas turned and looked at him. Hollis Treadway looked back, pleasantly, eyebrows up, waiting for an answer, like a man who had asked about a commute. 25, Silas said. About. Long stretch of nothing out there. It is. Nothing but that feed store. Hollis took another drink. Somebody ought to do something with that building. He tucked his newspaper up under his arm. You have a good day, neighbor, and walked back up his own driveway with his travel mug in his hand. Silas Dupree stood at the end of his driveway with 2 bills and a nursery catalog and understood exactly what had just been said to him. Nothing you could put in a file, nothing you could ever play for a board. A man had asked about a road. That was all. He went inside and washed his hands for longer than he needed to. Rosalind was at the table with a textbook open and a bowl of cereal she wasn't eating because she had a 9 o'clock and had learned to hate it. She looked up. You okay? And there it was again. The door, standing open, 3 years of it standing open, and a man walking past it every single time on his somewhere quieter. Tell her the man next door is the file. Tell her his lawyer ran your name 9 days after you filed. Tell her what a man like that does when he cannot win on the merits. Tell her that 18 years ago, you walked toward things that other people ran from, and that you were good at it, and that your hands still know how. Tell her that this is exactly why you have never once said a word about any of it. Because the second she knows what you are, she will start wondering what you might do, and she'll look at you across this table one day with that in her face, and you cannot survive that. That is the actual reason. Not Delphine, not the promise. You. I'm fine, Silas said. Rosalind held his eyes for 2 full seconds. Then she closed her textbook, picked up her bowl, and carried it to the sink without a word. She rinsed it, set it upside down on the rack, got her keys out of the bowl by the door, and went to class. Upstairs, later that night, she opened a folder called Receipts and added 1 line to a note at the bottom. June 27, he asked about my school. He asked which road I take. She sat there with her thumb over the screen for a minute. She did not know why she was writing it down. She wrote it down anyway. July came in hot and stayed that way. So Silas Dupree made a calendar, not on a phone, on paper. A plain wall calendar from the hardware store on Delancey with a photograph of a lighthouse on it that he had no feelings about whatsoever. He drew a box around October the 14th. That was the day the report was due. Findings, recommendation, disposition. 105 days from wherefore he was standing with a marker in his hand. Then he counted backward, because that is what the work actually is. You take the day the thing is due, and you walk it back through every single item that has to exist before it. And what you get is not a schedule. What you get is a list of the places where somebody can stop you. Interviews with 3 former dispatchers, 2 weeks minimum, because people who used to work somewhere have opinions and no obligations. A record subpoena for the missing pages. 30 days for a response, and the response would be a letter, and the letter would say no responsive documents, because it always does, and a statement from the driver. That was the one he put the second box around, because a paper trail tells you what happened, but a man tells you what it cost, and a board reading a report on a Tuesday afternoon in a room with bad carpet does not move for a spreadsheet. They move for 1 sentence out of a human mouth. He needed Wendell Pryor. He wrote the name at the bottom of the calendar, see small letters, underneath the lighthouse, where nobody coming into that room would see it. Then he had back and looked at what he had made. 105 days, and a man on the other side of the fence who did not need to win a single one of them, who needed exactly one thing. He needed Silas to put his hands on somebody in front of a phone. What Hollis Treadway did that summer was nothing. That was the whole architecture of it, and it took Silas most of July to see, because he had spent his life looking for a wire, and this had no wire in it anywhere. Hollis waved. Hollis brought over a bag of tomatoes in the second week and stood at the bottom of the porch steps while Silas thanked him. Hollis stood in his own driveway with a hose on a Sunday afternoon and said something about the humidity that was, honestly, funny. And he never said one word to his son. Not once, not where Silas could see it. Silas had been raised by a woman who could stop him from doing something with the back of her neck. He knew what correction looked like from 40 yards away in bad light. There was none. The truck sat in front of the Dupree mailbox, and the father walked past it 9 separate times. The music ran until 8:30, and the father sat out on his own porch inside of it and read a magazine. And on the third Saturday, when one of the gym friends threw a beer can into the Dupree hedge on his way to the car, Hollis Treadway watched him do it. And then turned around and went in the house. That was the message, not a threat. Threats are things you can write down and hand to somebody. A man taking his hands off a leash, and then standing very still in good light so that you can see both of them. Silas started a log, a composition book, 99 cents at the drugstore. He kept it in the kitchen drawer with the batteries and the electrical tape because a locked cabinet is the first place a lawyer looks, and a junk drawer is a place nobody looks ever. Date, time, what happened, who was standing there, not for the file. His program manager's voice, flat, over a phone in June. For you. He wrote in it 3 times the week and 9 times the second. And on the 19th July, he wrote a line that he went back and underlined afterward, which he did not do for any of the others. 7:40 p.m. 2 of them on the sidewalk. Phones already up before anything happened. Because that was the tell. Because a phone that comes out afterward is a person reacting. A phone that is already up is a person waiting. Wendell Pryor lived 22 minutes away on the far side of Ashgrove in a ground floor unit of a 4-unit building with vinyl siding the color of weak coffee. Silas parked across the street and sat there for a minute with the engine off. He had called on a Tuesday, say, and the man had said, yes, come out. Thursday is fine, and had not asked one single question about why, which told Silas something before he ever got out of the car. It told him that nobody had come out in a while. The ramp was wrong. He saw it before he saw anything else. Plywood over pressure treated framing, no handrail, and a rise to run that his eye put at somewhere around 1 to 6, which is not a ramp. That is a slide with a good attitude. Somebody's brother-in-law had built it in an afternoon, and everybody had stood around and said thank you. Silas stood at the bottom and looked at that pitch and felt something turn over low in his chest, because he had spent 18 years being the man who noticed the thing that was almost right. The door opened before he knocked. You're the government. I'm a contractor for a federal board. So you're the government. That's fair. Come on in. Mind that ramp? It'll kill you. The apartment was clean the way a place gets clean when a man has too much time and nowhere to put it. Everything at chest height, nothing on the floor. A recliner and a wheelchair and a card table with a laptop on it and a stack of envelopes squared up the corner. Wendell Pryor was 51 and built like a man who had spent 26 years hauling himself up into a cab. Big through the shoulders, big hands. Gray in a beard he kept short. He wheeled around the card table and pointed at the recliner. Sit down. You're too tall for standing. I'm all right. Sit down, man. You standing over me for an hour. That's a whole thing. Neither one of us wants it. Silas sat down and thought, he has done this before. He has had to teach people how to be in a room with him. They talked for an hour and 10 minutes. Silas took him through it. Not the crash. He had the crash. He had the crash in formats, and 2 of them had photographs, everything around it. The pre-trip inspection. The last annual. Who did the annuals? Whether the yard had a mechanic or a guy. Whether you could write a truck up and have it fixed, or whether you could write it up and have it come back the following Monday with a sticker on it and nothing else changed. Wendell answered everything. 26 years of answers delivered in a level voice, hands flat on the arms of the chair. Yes, he had written it up at February. In the book. No, he had not kept a copy, because in 26 years he had never once needed a copy of anything. Yes, it came back. No, nothing had been done to it that he could tell. And he could tell. Because a man who has been driving that long can feel a brake job through the floor of a cab the way you can feel a new mattress through a sheet. So why did you take it out? Wendell looked at him. Say that again. You knew it was wrong. You took it out anyway. Why? And Silas watched a 51-year-old man decide whether or not to be insulted. He decided not to be. It went across his face and it went away. Because I had 4 days of hours left in my clock and a load booked out of the yard at 6, Wendell said. Because it was March and I'd been short since Christmas. Because I told myself I'd baby it down the grade. And did you? I babied it down that grade for about 400 yards. The room got quiet. Somewhere in the building, a washing machine went into a spin cycle and the floor hummed. You want the honest reason? Wendell said. The one I've had 19 weeks flat on my back to think about. I do. Because I'd have felt stupid, he said it simply, like a man reading a gauge. Sax at 6 in the morning, telling a dispatcher half my age that I don't like how something feels. 26 years, and I would have felt stupid. He looked down at his own hands. I'd have felt like the old man who's scared of the hill. Silas did not say anything for a moment. Because there was version of that in the sense he had said to himself in the dark, another country with his knees in the dirt and both hands on something that could have gone either way. The exact same sentence. Don't be the one who calls it. Anybody come out? Silas said, after. Insurance came. Twice company. A woman calls. What woman? Woman from the office. Wendell shrugged one shoulder. Nice lady. Every other Friday. Asks how I'm doing. Asks do I need anything. What do you tell her? I told her I needed my legs back. And she got quiet. And then she asked about the weather. He almost smiled. She's all right. She never did nothing to me. Sas wrote none of that down, which he noticed later in the car at a light on Delancey, that his pen stopped moving about 40 minutes in and had not started again. At the door, Wendell turned the chair around and put his back to it, not blocking it in a hostile way. Just in the way a man does when he has one more thing and does not want to say it to somebody who is already halfway gone. Can I ask you something, Mr. Dupree? Silas, can I ask you something? Ask. You drove out here on a Thursday. That's right? Y'all don't do that. Wendell tipped his head. 26 years. I've been deposed twice and had a claims adjuster in my kitchen one time. Nobody drives out. Y'all do it on the phone, and you do it in 40 minutes, and you got a script. Silas said nothing. So I'm going to ask you a question, Wendell Pryor said, and I want you to know I'm not being smart with you. I'm asking because I need to know what it is I'm sitting in. Go ahead. You doing this for me? A beat. Or you doing it for you? The air conditioner cycle zoomed off, and in the silence after it, the whole apartment seemed to lean in. And Silas Dupree, who had briefed admirals, who had talked a shaking man through backing out of a room he never should have walked into, who had stood in front of a coffin and read a paragraph off an index card in a voice that did not break, stood in a rented living room in Ashgrove and could not find one true sentence. Because the honest answer had a fence in it, and a man's good laugh over a good beer at the hour when the light comes in gold, and a truck parked in front of a mailbox. I don't know yet, Silas said. Wendell Pryor looked at him a long moment. Then he nodded once and rolled the chair out of the way. Well, he said, at least you didn't lie about it. The lilacs went down on the 25th of July, Saturday, middle of the afternoon. Rosalind had 2 women from the nursery over, both a couple of years older than her, all 3 of them out on the back deck with iced tea and a laptop and a plant order they were supposed to be checking against a delivery manifest. Silas heard laughing. He would remember that. In October, in a room with a recorder running, he would remember that the first sound of that afternoon was his daughter laughing at something. Then he heard wood. That dry crack a green branch makes when it goes. He was through the kitchen and out the side door in 4 minutes. Brennan Treadway and 2 friends were at the fence line, on the Dupree side of it, working their way down the row. Not vandalizing exactly, not swinging bats, kicking, casual. The way you kick a can along a sidewalk, one at a time, low at the base, where 12-year-old wood gives. 4 of them were already down, and Silas came across his own grass and heard his own voice come out of him at a volume that surprised him with how low it was. Off my property. Brennan turned around. It's a bush. Off my property. Man, they're bushes. You're standing inside my fence I built. Go home. And this is the part Silas would take apart 100 times afterward, on runs. At 3:30 in the morning, sitting at a red light with the engine idling, Brennan Treadway looked past him. At the deck, where 3 young women had gotten to their feet, he checked his audience. Then he came forward and took a handful of Silas Dupree's collar in his right hand and shoved. Toward the deck. Toward Rosalind. What happened next took a second and a half. Silas did not decide anything. His left hand came up and took the wrist, not the hand. The wrist above the joint, thumb, finding the gap between the two bones, where a man's grip stops belonging to him. His hips turned into it, not away from it, into it, and 210 pounds of forward pressure went around a corner it had not planned on, and the knees hit the grass, and the shoulder went down with them. No strike, no seconds, collar to ground. Silas let go immediately. He stepped back one pace with both hands open at his sides and said, at a completely ordinary volume, in the tone of a man mentioning a small inconvenience, "Ground's wet. Sprinklers ran at noon." Then he put his hand out, and Brennan Treadway, who did not know what else to do, who had been in 100 rooms where the answer to this was obvious, and this was not one of those rooms, took it. Silas pulled him up, set him on his feet, even brushed the grass off his shoulder with 2 fingers, which he would think about later and would never be able to explain to himself. Nobody said one word. Then Brennan walked back across the fence line, and his friends went with him, and none of them laughed on the way, which was the first time all summer. Silas turned around. His daughter was standing on the deck with her hands at her sides. Her 2 friends were behind her, and both of them had their phones up, but it was the third one that mattered. Because when Silas turned back toward the fence, one of the gym friends, the tall one, the one who had not said a single word all summer, was walking backward toward the Treadway driveway, with his arm out, with his phone up, recording, and he had not raised it. He had been holding it that way when Silas came out the side door. Silas stood in his own yard with 4 broken lilacs at his feet and understood exactly what he had just been walked into. Hollis came within the hour. He did not stop at the fence. He came up the driveway and across the front walk and up the porch steps, and he was standing at the door with his hands out from his body, palms forward, the way men do when they want you to know that they are reasonable, before Silas got the screen open. "Silas, you're on my porch." "I am. I'd like to say a few things, and I'd like you to let me finish." Silas did not open the screen. He stood behind it in his own doorway, in his own house, and looked at a man who had walked 40 feet onto property he had not been invited onto and had done it without 1 second of hesitation. Say them from there. Something went across Hollis Treadway's face and went away again. "My son's shoulder is jammed up. He's got a fight card in 9 weeks. He put his hands on me first. I'm not litigating it on your porch. Then don't stand on it." Hollis's jaw set. "There are people I know at the county," he said. "I'm not saying that as a threat. I'm saying it as a fact about my life. I sit on a board with a man who has lunch with the sheriff twice a month. I have written checks for the last 4 campaigns in this district, and I did not always like who I was writing them to. You want me impressed or afraid? I want you careful." Hollis took half a step closer to the screen. "Because I have been doing this a long time, and I have watched a great many men lose everything they had over 4 seconds of being right." Through the mesh close, Silas could see the pores on the man's face. "There's a young woman in this house," Hollis said, "and I have us with a temper, and I am telling you as a father that these things away from people." The porch was very quiet. "Get off my property," Silas said. Hollis looked at him for a second. Then he stepped back, straightened his collar, looked out at the yard the way a man looks at a lot he is thinking about buying. I'll pay for the bushes." "No, Silas, no, they're bushes. They're my wife's," Silas said. And for 1/2 of 1 second, there was nothing at all on that porch, and Hollis Treadway's mouth did something, and Silas never did decide what it was. Then Hollis said, "All right," and went down the steps and walked home across the grass. Silas stood behind the screen for a long moment after he'd gone. Then he went out and sat down on the top step. He sat there until the light went, and the sprinklers came on across the street, and Loretta Pike's television came up blue through her open window. And he let himself do the thing he had been refusing to do since May, which was run the whole tape backward. The truck at the mailbox, nothing. The comment on the sidewalk, nothing. The music, nothing. The phone in the street, and 2 sentences, and a hand closing his daughter's fingers around a cracked screen. Nothing. Every single time he had absorbed it. Cleanly, professionally, without one raised voice. And every single time, the line had moved out another 6 inches. Because that is what a boundary does when there is nothing living behind it. It stops being a boundary and becomes a suggestion. For 3 years, in every room, about everything, he had believed his stillness was a wall. Sitting those steps in the dark, he understood that it had been a hallway, and that somebody had been walking down it since the first week of May. The screen door opened behind him. Rosalind sat down on the step above his and put her chin on her knees. Are they going to sue us? No. You don't know that? I know that. How? Because there is nothing to sue about, and because his lawyer bills him $350 an hour to tell him so. She was quiet for a while. Then, carefully, Dad, where did you learn to do that? And there it was, the door, standing open. On a Saturday in July, in the dark, with 4 broken legs lying in the yard, tell her. Tell her it was 11 years and a job with a 2-word name, and that the 2 words are the least interesting part of it. Tell her you knew that man's ramp was pitched wrong from inside a parked car. Tell her you have known where the exits were in every room she has ever stood in with you since the day she was born, and that you never once chose to know it. Tell her. And then watch her look at you differently for the rest of her life, and know you did that to her yourself. Navy said. Rosalind lifted her head. That's not an answer, baby. No, that's genuinely not an answer. That's a word. She stood up. Marlon Kowalczyk was in the Navy. He can't parallel park. Rosalind, you put a 200-pound guy on the ground in 3 seconds, and then you helped him up, and you told him the grass was wet. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she hated it. He could hear her hate it. You know how that looked? It looked like you were bored. Don't, she went in. The screen door did not slam, which was worse, because she caught it. Silas Dupree sat on his steps in the dark, with his hands hanging between his knees for another 20 minutes. Upstairs, at 11:40 that night, a folder called Receipts got 2 new entries. A photograph of 4 broken lilacs, shot with the fly, time-stamped, and a note. July 25, he said he'd pay for the bushes. He came up on the porch. Dad wouldn't open the door. August was the squeeze. The subpoena went out on the 4th. The response came back on the 29th. 4 business days inside the window on very good letterhead. After a diligent search, no responsive documents were located. Silas read it standing at the kitchen counter and laughed out loud, one note which startled him. Because he would have bet money on the phrasing, and he would have been wrong. He had expected, no documents exist. No documents were located is a completely different animal. That is, a sentence by somebody who wants to stand later. He put it in the file and wrote on the back of the envelope. Located. Not exist. The dispatchers were worse. 3 names. 2 former. 1 still there. The current one did not call back, which he had expected before he dialed. The first former one talked for 6 minutes and then stopped in the middle of a sentence and said, You know what? I've got somebody starting a job next month, and I'm not doing this," and hung up and did not answer again. The second one was a woman who had run the trade for 4 years and left in the fall. She let him get all the way to the end. Then she said, "Can I tell you what I would say? If I were saying anything." "You can. I'd say the book was never the problem." Her voice dropped. "Everybody writes it up. Guys write things up all day long. That's what the book is for. I'd say the problem was what happened between the book and the shop. And I'd say there was a man whose entire job was to stand in that gap. Was there a title for that job? There was not," she said. "That's the whole point of it. Have a good night." Click. Silas sat in his office with the phone still in his hand and the lighthouse calendar on the wall and 46 days left inside the box. He had a pattern. He had a hole where 3 pages used to be, a letter that said located, and a woman who would not say one sentence out loud with her own name attached to it. What he did not have was a person. And you cannot walk into a room and hand aboard a hole. His daughter got quiet in August. He noticed it the way you notice weather changing in the night. Not an event, a pressure. She was up later. She was on her laptop with her door shut. Twice he came down at 4 in the morning for water and saw the light under her door and stood in the hallway for a second and then went back up. She stopped, leaving her phone face up on the table. On the 11th, absolutely nowhere, over a plate of eggs, and a Tuesday. Does your work ever go to court? Sometimes. Like you go, in person? Sometimes, she said, and ate her eggs. And Silas Dupree, who had once identified a device by the color of the dust sitting on top of it, looked at his own child across a kitchen table and thought, "She's fine. She's 19. This is what 19 looks like." He was wrong. He would find out exactly how wrong on a Wednesday in September, with her hand wrapped in gauze, at that same table. Loretta Pike caught him at the mailbox on the last Friday in August. "You coming to the cookout?" "I always come to the cookout." You always come to the cookout and stand by the cars for 4 hours. I like the cars. She shifted her purse to the other arm. My brother-in-law's in town for the long weekend, staying with me through Tuesday. He's retired something or other. Wears a hat about it. He'll talk your ear off. Sounds fine. He will talk your ear off, Silas. I've got two. Loretta Pike laughed and went inside. And Silas walked back up his driveway and forgot the entire conversation inside of 90 seconds. The Marlow Crossing Block cookout had been happening on Labor Day for 19 years. Folding tables dragged out onto the green at the bottom of the street. 3 grills going in shifts. A cooler nobody guarded that got raided all afternoon. Somebody's speaker playing the same 40 songs it had been playing since before. Rosalind could walk. Delphine had loved it. Delphine had run that dessert table like a woman deploying troop. Silas came down at 11:30 with a foil pan of macaroni salad and a folding chair he had no intention of sitting in. Rosalind came at noon, straight off a shift, still in her nursery polo, hair up, and he watched her get absorbed into a knot of people over by the drinks and let out a breath he had been holding since about 8 that morning. The first hour was good. He would think about that later, that it was actually good. He talked to a man about a fence post. He ate a plate of somebody's beans. Loretta Pike walked, a heavy-set woman in his 40s, over and introduced him. Navy ball cap, reading glasses pushed up on the brim, and the man shook his hand and said his name was Harlan, and Silas said his was Silas. Then somebody called Loretta about the ice, and that was the end of it. Silas did not look at him twice. Harlan Voss did. But Silas's had already put himself at the north edge of the green, near the parked cars, with a clean line of sight to his daughter and a clean line out to the street. He had not decided to do that. He had never once, in his entire adult life, decided to do that. Sola Stretway arrived at 1:40 with a case of good beer on his shoulder and a cooler on a hand truck, and the energy of a man who expects a room to make space for him. The block made space. Brennan came in behind him, 4 friends as a pair of gloves under his arm. Silas set his plate down. The green went quiet in pieces, table by table, that soft collapse of noise that runs through a gathering when it works out what it is looking at. Somebody turned the music down. Somebody else did not turn it off, and it kept going, thin and stupid, underneath everything that happened next. Brennan crossed 30 feet of grass and threw the gloves down, red leather, scuffed at the knuckles, still warm. They landed an inch from Silas Dupree's boot. "I'm going to put you flat on this grass," Brennan Treadway said. "In front of your daughter." The phones came up, all 4 of them, together, like a drill. Silas did not look at the gloves. He stepped sideways, 2 feet, just enough to put himself on the line between Brennan Treadway and the dessert table, where his daughter was standing with a paper cup in her hand and her face going gray. "I'm not fighting you," he said. "You put your hands on me at my own. I'm not fighting you. Step back from my daughter." Brennan laughed. The performance one, pitched for the back tables. "You hear that?" He turned a half circle with his arms out. "That's the whole thing right there. That's him. He's been doing this all summer. Won't say nothing, won't do nothing, won't be nothing. Go home. Don't tell me to go home. Go home." And then Brennan Treadway said the thing. He said it loud enough that the whole row of tables heard it, and he said it looking at Rosalind and not at her father, which is what told Silas that somebody had told him to. He said her mother's name. He said Delphine Dupree's name out loud on that grass. A woman he had never met. A woman who had put 22 feet of lilac in the ground with her own 2 hands and would not let anybody help because she said it would come out looking like a parking lot. And he attached to it a sentence so cheap and so exact that 4 separate people at the nearest table made a sound. Then he said to Rosalind, "You know what he's teaching you? Right now, standing there? He's teaching you that hiding is the same sense of strength. That's it. That's your whole inheritance." Silas felt the world go clean. That was the word for it. Clean. Edges sharp. Sound dropping away at the sides, he knew that feeling from other places, and he had not felt it in 11 years, and he did not want it here, on a green 20 feet from a bowl of macaroni salad. A hand closed on his sleeve. "Dad," Rosalind, at his elbow close. "Dad, please." Her voice was small. Smaller than it had heard since the week of the funeral, and that did more damage to him than every word out of Brennan Treadway's mouth put together. So Silas Dupree turned around to walk away. That is the truth of it. That is what is on Loretta Pike's video, shot from her own front porch at 110 feet in the 4th minute. He turned around to walk away, and Brennan Treadway grabbed Rosalind by the arm to stop him. It was not a punch. It was worse than a punch, because it was casual. A hand shot out to catch a sleeve and move a person out of the way you move a chair. Except she was already turning, except her weight was on her back foot, except the green ends in a concrete apron where the grills sit. She went down hard on her left side and caught herself on her right palm, on concrete, and Silas heard the sound of it, 19 years old, sitting up on the apron with her hand held out away from her body and her mouth blood already coming through the grit. 3 years of holding everything in one careful place came apart in a second and a half. He crossed to her. He went down on one knee and took the wrist and turned the hand over and looked at it, actually looked at it. Heel of the palm opened up, gravel in it, no arterial bleeding, tendons intact, all 5 fingers moving. Can you close it? Dad, baby, close it. She closed it. He got her up. Loretta Pike was already there, already reaching, had come off her own porch and across 30 yards of grass at 63 years of age. Silas put his daughter's shoulders into that woman's hands and said, "Take her to the tables." And Loretta Pike said, "I've got her," and meant it. Then Silas Dupree stood up and turned around. He did not raise his voice. That is on the video too, which is why the video mattered so much later. I apologize to her, then leave. This ends right here if you walk away now. Brennan Treadway looked back at his friends, checked the phones, and pulled the gloves on. I'm going to make sure she watches them carry you off this grass. Silas took off the flannel shirt he had on over his undershirt. He folded it once and set it on the edge of the nearest folding table, square to the corner, the way he had folded and set down every piece of gear he had ever taken off in 18 years. Then he stepped out onto the open grass. Brennan opened well. That was the first surprise for everybody watching, and it was no surprise at all to Silas. Jab, jab, right hand. The hands were fast and the feet were faster, and there was nothing sloppy anywhere in it. Somebody had put 4 years into that young man, and it showed inside of 2 seconds. Silas did not block. Blocking is for people who intend to stay where they are. He slipped outside the second jab and let the right hand go past his ear, close enough to feel the air come off it. And then he stepped into the empty pocket that a right hand leaves behind and put one hand flat on the back of Brennan Treadway's shoulder. Just a hand, just pressure. In the direction the man was already going. Brennan went face first into the grass. Somebody laughed. One person over by the drinks. A short bark of it cut off fast. And Silas watched that sound land on the back of a 22-year-old's neck and do more damage than the fall had. Brennan came up quick. Reset. Bounced twice. Reset again. Then he threw a spinning back kick. And it was good. It was genuinely good. It was a technique off a highlight reel, and if Silas had been standing 8 inches further back, it would have ended the afternoon right there. He was not. He closed, because you cannot be hit by a wheel if you are standing inside it. He got in past the pivot and hooked the standing legs with his own instep and took the whole structure down sideways. But the heel came through on the way past. It caught him on the left shoulder, square on the joint. On 11 years of a body doing things it was never built for, on a shoulder that had been rebuilt once by a surgeon in a naval hospital and had never been the same in cold weather since. His arm went dead to the elbow, his knee dipped, he gave up half a step. Somebody near the grill sucked in a breath, and nobody laughed after that. Because the Greenhead has just been told something, that the quiet man was not made out of iron, that this was not a demonstration, that there were 2 men out there, and one of them could be hurt. Silas rolled the shoulder once. Feeling came back in about 4 seconds, in the bad way, like a hand coming out of cold water. Brennan was on his back in the grass with his chest going. Stay down, Silas said. He had not thrown one strike. He would not that day throw one. Stay down. It's finished. And Silas saw it and would think about it for a very long time afterward. The young man stayed down. 3 seconds. 4. Chest heaving, knee scraped raw through his shorts, and something coming up into his face that looked almost like relief. Like a man who has been running for a long time and has just been given permission to stop. Then Brent Treadway looked past him, at the Dawsody line, at his father. And Silas did not turn around because you never turn around, but he heard it. Get up. Hollis Treadway's voice, not loud, not screaming, just certain. Get up, Brennan. And the thing in the young man's face closed like a door. He came up off the ground into a double-leg takedown, low and hard, arms wrapping the hips, driving. Silas dropped his weight, turned into it, get never away, got his hip past the shoulder, and took the whole thing over and down, and landed Treadway face down in the grass, both arms folded up behind him, in a hold that had nowhere left to go. Not a submission, a restraint. Nothing about it was designed to hurt him. Every part of it was designed to make him stop. Brennan thrashed, twice hard, and then a third time with something in his throat that was not anger anymore. "Tap," Silas said. "Quiet, right by his ear out and I let you up. There is nothing left to win here." He did not tap, because his father was standing on the sideline, because 40 people were watching, because a 22-year-old with a sponsor's name on a banner in Ashgrove would rather have his arm broken than tap in front of his own street. Silas felt him refuse and understood exactly why. And then Hollis Treadway came across the grass, shouting that this man was going to hurt his son, and knocked a folding chair over sideways doing it. And in the 2 seconds that every eye on that green went to the chair, Brennan Treadway's free hand found the grill. Not the grill, the tool rack hanging off the side of it, a long-handled coal rake. 3 feet of steel, with a 4-inch flat head on the end. He got it, and he swung it, blind, from the ground on his side, in the general direction of the weight on his back. It missed Silas by about 8 inches, and kept going. Because that is what a swing does. It does not stop where you stopped caring about it. The arc came around and up and out, toward the concrete apron, toward the tables, toward the exact patch of ground where a 19-year-old had just pulled free of Loretta Pike's hands and started running back toward her father, because the shouting had gotten loud and frantic and she was 19. Silas saw her. One frame, left periphery, motion at hip height. There was nothing to weigh. His right arm came off the pin and caught Rosalind across the collarbones and threw her. There is no gentler word for it. He threw his own daughter 4 feet sideways onto the grass, and his left hand, the bad one, the dead one, closed on the shaft of the rake as it came through and stripped it out of Brennan Treadway's fist. He sent it spinning away across the green. It hit the base of a folding table and rang like a bell. Then Silas put Brennan back down, face into the grass, both arms up behind him, complete, and when he spoke his voice had changed. It had dropped somewhere. It had gone flat and short and absolutely certain of itself, and it did not belong to the man who fixed gutters and waved from the porch. "You're done. Do not move. You move and you are going to injure yourself, and it will be your own doing." Nobody on that green had ever heard that voice. Rosalind Dupree had never heard that voice. And in the silence afterward, a man in a navy ball cap came through the crowd. He came up close enough to see a face from 3 feet. Harlan Voss stood there with his reading glasses pushed up on the brim of his hat, looking down at a man kneeling on grass in a gray undershirt with a shoulder that was not working right. And he said, "Senior Chief Dupree." 40 people. Not one of them said one word. Harlan Voss. He took the hat off like that would help. "Third platoon. You were chief when you pulled me off that road, so I don't know what to call you now." Silas looked up. And there it was, 12 years and 80 pounds later, but there it was. A lean, hard, 34-year-old man sitting in the dirt with his hands going, saying, "Chief, my hands won't stop." "Voss," Silas said. That was the entire reunion. 2 syllables on a lawn. Released Brennan Treadway's wrists. He checked first. Actual shows checked. Both shoulders, both bows, range of motion. The way you check somebody you have just controlled. Then he stood up, stepped back with both hands open at his sides. Rosalind reached to him a moment later. She got her arms around his middle with her bleeding hand held out to the side so it would not get on him, and Silas Dupree stood in the middle of the green with his daughter against his chest and 40 people staring at him and his flannel shirt folded on a table 20 feet away. 3 years of quiet mornings, gone in about 90 seconds. The first cruiser came up Marlow 4 minutes later. Silas heard it before he saw it, and did the thing he had been doing his entire adult life, which was arrange himself. He stepped away from his daughter. He moved to open ground, away from the tables, away from anybody. He put his hands out from his body at 45 degrees, palms forward, fingers spread. He had nothing in either hand. And he said to Rosalind without looking at her, in a voice that was calm and fast, "Stand still. Don't come toward me. Whatever happens, do not come toward me. Dad, say okay. Okay." The officer came across the grass quick. Young, 26 maybe, hand riding the bell. And at that moment, on that green, the following things were visible to any human eye. A steel rake lying in the grass 10 feet from a young white man who was sitting up in his father's arms holding his own shoulder. A 19-year-old woman standing by a table with her right hand wrapped in a wad of napkins going through red, and a black man in a gray undershirt standing alone in open ground with both hands. Sir, on the ground. Officer, on the ground, face down. Silas Dupree went down on his own street. He did it fast and clean. Knee, hands, chest, face turned to the side, arms out, fingers spread flat on the grass, ankles crossed. He had done it before. Twice. Once at 22 in a parking lot in Norfolk. Once at 31 in a rental car outside a bakecast at 1:45. His body knew the choreography the way it knew how to fold a shirt. And the thing that went through his mind, lying face down at the Marlow Crossing Labor Day cookout, was not rage. It was a checklist, hands visible, voice, don't say the word no, don't say the word wait. Answer with sir. Don't move the right hand, that's the one he's watching. Say your name before he asks for it. Say federal contractor once. Don't say his taste twice. Sounds like a man with something to protect. He was 44 years old, and he was rehearsing. He had been rehearsing since he was 15. He turned his head an inch and saw his daughter's shoes. She had not moved. She had done exactly what he told her. She was standing where he had left her with her ruined hand pressed against her stomach, watching her father lie face down in the grass, while the man who put him there sat in his own father's arms. Silas closed his eyes because that was the thing spent 3 years and every ounce of discipline he owned trying to make sure she would never have to see. And here it was anyway, on a Monday, at a cookout, with the music still playing. Then Loretta Pike's voice came across that green like a door slamming. You have got the wrong man on the ground. Ma'am, step back. I will not. 63 years old, 22 years on this street, 6 years on the zoning board. That man right there pushed his own daughter out of the way of that rake. The one lying in the grass behind you that you have not looked at one single time since you got out of your car. Ma'am, his girl's hand is open to the bone and you've got him in the dirt. Officer, Harlan Voss, stepping up with a wallet already open. Harlan Voss, 22 years, retired. I'm a witness, so are about 40 other people, and about 9 of them have it on video. The young officer stopped. Silas felt it, lying there. He felt the moment stop moving. I've got it, Loretta Pike said, from my porch. The whole thing, 4 minutes and change. A long pause. Sir, the officer said, you can sit up. Silas sat up, slowly, hands where they could be seen. He got to his feet and brushed the grass off the front of his undershirt, and did not say one single word about any of it. Not then, not later, not to anybody. The second officer took statements for 1 hour and 10 minutes. By the end of it, it was Brennan Treadway looking at a charge involving a dangerous weapon. And Hollis Treadway was standing at the edge of the grass with his hands on his hips, listening to a 26-year-old explain that to him, looking like a man doing arithmetic that kept coming out wrong. The video went up on Wednesday, 51 seconds. It opened with Silas Dupree taking his shirt off, which is a hell of a place to start a story. Then the hand flat on the shoulder, then the leg hook. Then a cut, and the cut was clean. You would never see it if you were not looking for it. Half a second of crowd spliced in to cover the jump. And then Brennan Adwalthia face down in the grass with both arms behind his back. And a man's voice saying, you're done, do not move. Then Hollis running in. Then black. The caption said, former Special Operations sailor assaults 22-year-old amateur fighter at a neighborhood party. Kid's father had to pull him off. 4 seconds were missing. The 4 seconds in which a coal rake came off a grill rack and swung through the air toward a 19-year-old woman. 4 seconds. By Friday, it had 240,000 views. By Sunday, a page with 11 million followers had reposted it, with a caption about training and restraint and what happens when men like that come home. Rosalind came back from a shift on Saturday with her hand rebandaged and her face like a closed fist. Somebody said something. It's fine. Roz. A woman perennials asked me if my dad was okay. She dropped her keys in the bowl, not if I was okay. If he was okay, she wanted to know if he was getting help. Silas did not say anything. I told her the video was cut. What did she say? Rosalind looked at him. She said, oh, honey. The call came on the 15th of September at 10 minutes to 9 in the morning. Silas was standing at the kitchen counter. His program manager's voice was voiced wrong in a way he had never heard it before. Silas, are you sitting down? I'm standing up. Sit down. He sat down. There's a complaint. Anonymous. Filed through the public portal. It requests a fitness for duty review and reassignment of TCL 1147 on the grounds of investigator temperament. That's the play. I told you that in June. That is not why I'm calling. Paper. Then nothing, then paper again. Ma'am, I'm going to read you one line out of it, she said, and then you are going to tell me where it came from. And she read it. 11 words. A clause out of a paragraph, out of a section headed Clinical Impressions, out of a psychological evaluation conducted at a naval medical facility in the 3rd week after Silas Apri separated from service. Word for word, including a comma that was in the wrong place. Silas sat at his own kitchen table with phone against his ear and felt something go through him that he had honestly believed he was no longer capable of feeling, because that document existed in 3 places on this earth: his own sealed personnel record, a federal medical archive, and a green envelope with a red string closure in the top drawer of a locked cabinet 40 feet from where he was sitting, which had not been out of that drawer in 3 years. It was not on the internet. It was not in any court file. It had never been produced in any proceeding ever because it had never been part of one. Silas, I'm here. Where did they get that? I don't know. You have to know. Ma'am, his voice did something. He heard it do it.
I don't know.
Because a sentence like that is not an accusation. Anybody can make an accusation. It is a message. It says we can reach into the room where you keep yourself. It says we have already been in there. It says think about what else we might have. He drove out to Ashgrove that same afternoon. He did not call ahead. The ramp was new. That is what he saw first from the street, and said he saw her with both hands on the wheel and looked at it for a while. Pressure treated. Handrails on both sides. A landing at the top so the door had somewhere to open into. Rise to run about 1 to 12. Somebody had built it right. Somebody had like Sadie to build it right. Wendell Pryor opened the door and looked at his face and said, "Aw, hell, can I come in? Silas, 10 minutes. He let him in. The apartment had changed. There was a grab bar in the bathroom doorway. There was a transfer board leaning in the corner. And on the refrigerator, held up with a magnet shaped like a peach, was a printed schedule. Neurorehabilitation, Tuesday and Thursday, 9 in the morning. 16 CPIT. Silas read the dates from 8 feet away without meaning to. You want water? I want a statement. I know what you want. 20 minutes on the recorder. That's all. What you told me in July, the February write-up, the truck coming back, the 400 yards. No. Wendell. No, sir. Silas stood in the middle of that clean room. They've got 3 pages missing, he said. I have a letter that says no documents were located. I have a woman who ran that yard for 4 years and will not finish a sentence with her name on it. I have a hole where a maintenance record used to be. Then you write about the hole. I cannot hand aboard a hole.
His voice came up for the first time in 4 months, and he pulled it down.
I need a person, then another person. There isn't another person, says there's you. You're the one it happened to. And Wendell Pryor put both hands flat on the arms of the chair. You see that ramp? Silas did not answer. You saw it. I watched you see it from the car. Wendell's mouth went sideways. First one gave me a fat lip in June. Went down it too fast and put my face in the door of a Buick. Wendell. 19 weeks, hospital and rehab, and then the money's gone. Insurance tapped out at a number I could tell you to the dollar. He nodded at the refrigerator. 16 more weeks on that schedule. That block right there is what decides whether I get myself out of a bed for the next 30 years, or whether somebody has to come do it for me. Who's paying for it? You know who's paying for it. There it was. Sitting in the middle of a clean apartment in Ashgrove on a Tuesday afternoon in September. There's no contract, Wendell said. Signed. Not one person has ever said one word to me about my mouth. That lady still calls every other Friday. Asks how I'm doing. Asks do I need anything. He looked up, and 2 weeks after I told her the ramp was steep, there was a man out there with a saw. Silas did not move. You understand what I'm telling you? I do. No. I don't believe you do. And for the first time in either conversation, Wendell Pryor's voice moved. They did not buy my silence. Nobody bought my silence. My silence is sent not for sale. I'd tell a courtroom the whole thing tomorrow morning and sleep like a baby. He struck the arm of the chair once with the flat of his hand. They bought my legs. Silas drove home on Delancey with the windows down, and he was angry. He was as angry as he had been in a decade, and it was pointed in a direction that shamed him even while it was happening. Because it was pointed at a 51-year-old man in a rented room who had done the only arithmetic that was available to him. 26 years, and he will not say 4 sentences. I've got a hole in a file and a man in a chair, and he will not. He stopped at the light at Delancey and the water tower, and the anger turned over. Because what exactly, Silas Dupree, is the difference? What is the difference between a man who keeps his mouth shut so that he can learn to stand up, and a man who keeps his mouth shut for 3 years so that his daughter never has to look at him a certain way across a kitchen table? One of them is buying his legs. The other one is buying his comfort. The light went green. He sat through the whole cycle. Somebody behind him leaned on a horn, and he lifted a hand in the mirror and did not move for 4 more seconds. Then he drove home. Rosalind was at the kitchen table when he came in, not eating, not on her laptop, sitting there with her bandaged hand flat on the table in front of her like an object she was presenting into evidence. "Sit down," she said. "Baby." "Dad, sit down." He sat down. "There's a box," she said. "In July, you carried a box in from the car at like 10 at night and you took it straight to the office?" Yes, ears. Silas went very still. It had a sticker on the side, green one, from a copy services. She was looking at the table, and it said Treadway Cartage, in stencil, in capitals, and I remember it because I had just spent 6 weeks typing that name into my phone. Rosalind. So I looked it up. She turned her hand over, looked at her own palm through the gauze. There's a news item from March Local, 4 paragraphs. It says a Treadway Cartage driver was critically injured on a grade, and it says the company is cooperating, and it gives his name. She swallowed. Wendell Pryor, 51, 26 years. Silas said nothing, and I put it together, Dad. It isn't hard. It took 20 minutes. The man next door hurt somebody, and you're the one who decides what happens to him, and that is why he's been him. That's not why he moved. Okay, fine. It doesn't matter why. Her cracked and she caught it. That's not the part. Roz, what did you do? And his daughter looked up at him. 3 days before the cookout, she said. I was at the mailbox, and he came out to get their trash bin. Silas felt the floor go out from under the entire summer. And I said, she stopped, started again. I said, I know about Wendell Pryor. I know your dad threw away the brake records. The kitchen was completely silent. I didn't know that, she said. I made that part up. I don't know anything about brake records. I just wanted him to be scared of something for 1 second in his whole life. What did he do? Nothing. Her chin went. That's the thing, Dad. He didn't do anything. He didn't yell. He didn't laugh at me. He got this look on his face like I'd hit him with a car. She pressed her thumb into the edge of the gauze, and then he took the bin and went inside. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere down the block, a screen door banged and a car started up. And 3 days later, he came to a cookout with gloves. Rosalind. I did this. She was not crying. That was somehow worse. I said the thing, and then he came at us, and I've been sitting on it for 2 weeks, and hand looks like this. And there's a video with 11 million people on it, and there's a woman in perennials asking me if you're okay. She looked at her father. I did all of it, and I couldn't. And Silas Dupree, who for 3 straight years, in every single room, about every single thing, had said it's handled, reached across the table and did not say it. Silas Dupree reached across the table and took his daughter's left hand. The good one. He did not say it's not your fault. He had it loaded. It was sitting right behind his teeth, warm and easy and worthless, the same shape as it's handled. He put it down. You said a true sentence to a man's son at a mailbox, he said. Now, tell me what happened next. Nothing happened next. That's the nothing happened for 3 days. She stopped. 3 days, Roz. He didn't come over. He didn't post about it. Then on the 4th day, he walked onto green with gloves under his arm and 4 friends with their phones already up. So that's not a boy who got scared at a mailbox. That's a boy who carried it into his father's house. Her face came apart. All at once, in a way it had not at the cookout or at the urgent care or in 14 days of holding it alone. Silas came around the table and got down on one knee beside her chair and let his daughter cry into his bad shoulder for a long time. He did not move it. There's a second thing, he said when she was done. It's about me, and it's worse. You sat on that for 2 weeks and couldn't bring it down the stairs. You didn't get that out of a book. She wiped her face. It's handled. It's handled, he said. 900 times in this house. The refrigerator hummed. Your mother asked me one thing at the end. She said let her know you as more than what the war made. He looked at the floor. I heard that and decided it meant don't tell her anything. I built a wall and I put your mother's name on it. So what are you going to do? Silas stood up. I'm going to show you the drawer. He turned on the desk lamp instead of the overhead. The file box first, TCL 1147. The reconstruction diagram, the photograph of the median with 180 feet of torn earth through it, the maintenance binder with 11 months of tabs, and the gap. 3 pages. February 28th through March 2nd. Rosalind put one finger on the empty space. That's nothing. That's a man in a wheelchair, Silas said. Nothing is what it always looks like. She sat down in his chair, which she had never done, and read for 11 minutes. Then she said, "What's in the other drawer?" He didn't answer. "You said you were going to show me the drawer." And Silas Dupree stood in his own office and understood that his daughter had just walked him into a corner using nothing but his own sentence. Delphine used to do exactly that, word for word, then wait. He opened the top drawer. A folded flag in a triangle case. 2 ribbon boxes. A photograph of 11 men squatting in front of a wall with their faces in shadow, one of whom was 32 and had all his hair, and a green envelope with a red string closure. "That's the one," she said. "They put me in a room with a doctor for 4 hours when I came home." She wrote down what she thought of me. Then they sealed it. He sat on the corner of the desk. "I've read it once, 3 years ago. Is it bit bad? It's honest. That's not what I asked." "I know." He sat down in the chair nobody used, and he told her about a road, not the country. He still could not give her the country. But the road and 11 men flat behind a berm and a young man in the dirt saying, "Chief, my hands won't stop." And what Silas Dupree did with his own 2 hands for the next 40 minutes, while those men waited to find out whether he was any good. Plain, no adjectives, he didn't have any. It took 19 minutes. Mom, all of it, every word. And she still made you plant a garden. She still made me plant a garden. Rosalind leaned over and put her forehead against his arm. Hollis Treadway's letter went out on the last day of September. 14 pages, council letterhead. It demanded removal of the investigator on TCL 1147 for violent conduct, bias, and unfitness, and asked that the review restart from 0. Exhibit A was the 51-second video. Exhibit C was a copy of the anonymous complaint. The hearing was set for Friday. Harlan Voss came by on the Tuesday with 2 coffees and did not knock, because he had been in the Navy 22 years and had never knocked on anything. "There's a document," Silas told him. "If I put it in, they read all of it, and then it's real, Chief." Voss sat forward with his forearms on his knees. "It's been real for 18 years. The only thing that changes is whether other people have to look at it." He drank. "And they're looking at a fake one right now. 11 million of them liked it. The room on Halstead had bad carpet. He would have bet money on that, too." Denise Calloway was 55 with reading glasses on a chain. She did not shake anybody's hand. "Mr. Dupree, I am not here to determine whether you are a good man. People come in wanting me to do that. I cannot, and it's the wrong question. Understood. I'm here to determine whether the government's review of this carrier is sound. If review is sound as our disaster, it stands. That's fine. Most people say that." She looked over the glasses. Very few mean it. They played Exhibit A. Silas watched himself take his shirt off and fold it once. Then they played 4 minutes and 19 seconds off Loretta Pike's front porch, uncut, time-stamped, handed over inside 36 hours. The gloves, the 2 feet sideways. "I'm not fighting you." Step back from my daughter. A dead woman's name in a young man's mouth. A small voice saying, "Dad, a plea." A man turning around to walk away. A hand shooting out to move a girl like she was a chair. Concrete. "Stop it there," Calloway said, and wrote for 40 seconds. They played the rest. The pin. A father's voice off the sideline saying, "Get up, Brennan." A chair going over. A coal rake coming off a grill rack. Silas looked at the table. He had been watching that part every night since Labor Day at 3:15 in the morning. "I had both files examined Wednesday," Calloway said, picking up a single sheet. "Exhibit A is represented as continuous. It is not. There's a cut at 31 seconds. 4 seconds and 11 frames are missing, with half a second of unrelated crowd footage laid over the seam." She set the sheet down. In the 4 seconds removed, a steel implement leaves a grill rack, travels roughly 9 feet toward a stationary person, and is taken out of the hand holding it. Nobody said anything. That is not editing. That is the removal of the one fact the entire characterization depends on. And it was submitted to this office under a signature. She flipped back 2 pages before the medical record. "The letter represents your conduct as arising from a neighborhood dispute of unclear origin. Do you have anything on the principal's state of knowledge before September 5th? Silas took a breath. I do, but it isn't mine. He put a second folder on the table. My daughter kept a log starting in May. She never told me. She gave it to me Tuesday night. Photographs with timestamps. A cracked phone screen. A volume knob in cut grass. 4 broken lilacs shot with a flash. Screenshots saved with dates on them. And a text file of short flat entries written by somebody who had clearly decided not to editorialize. Calloway read it in silence for 2 minutes, then turned it around and put her finger on one line. Read that out loud, please. Silas looked at it.
June 27th.
He asked about my school. He asked which road I take. Calloway sat back. Treadway's counsel filed the motion to disqualify you on June 22nd, she said. So 5 days after his lawyer went looking for who you were, the principal walked down to a mailbox at 7 in the morning and asked a 19-year-old which road she drives to school. She wrote for a while. She's 19, she is. Then she signs her own affidavit and won't need you in the room. The office will call her Monday. She squared the folders. Now, your medical record. Silas put his hand flat on the green envelope and did not open it. There's a paragraph in here, he said. 40 words. 4th page. Every word true. The 11 words in that complaint come out of the middle of it. They didn't take the sentence after. What does the sentence after say? That the presentation is consistent with the population and does not indicate impairment of occupational function. He looked at her. That's the whole fight. 11 words against a comma and a next sentence. Then hand it to me and let me read both. It's been in a drawer 3 years. My daughter's the only living person who's heard what's in it, and she heard it 19 days ago. Calloway took her glasses off. She did not say anything soft. She was not going to. But she waited. Silas Dupree untied the red string and slid 4 pages across the table. She read for 6 minutes. The clock on the wall was the kind that clicks. Then she set the pages down, squared them, and reached for Exhibit C. She laid the anonymous complaint flat beside page 4 of the evaluation, then took the cover letter off Exhibit A, 14 pages, signed and laid it down on the other side. Come around and look at this. Silas came around. The clause. 11 words. There's a comma in it in the wrong place between the participle and the object where no editor on earth would put one. She moved her finger. The anonymous complaint. Same 11 words. Same comma. She moved her finger a 3rd time. Page 9 of Hollis Treadway's letter, counsel letterhead, dated the 30th of September, the 11 words, with the comma. They quoted it to signed filing, Silas said. 13 days after the anonymous one, their position will be that they read it in the public docket.
Is it in the public docket?
No, said Denise Calloway. The Rusum was quiet enough to hear the clock. Anonymous fitness complaints go to a restricted queue, not published, not served on the regulated party. There is no lawful mechanism by which that language was in front of them on September 30th. She picked up her pen. So either somebody at that firm accessed a restricted federal queue, or somebody in that firm wrote the anonymous complaint. Both require obtaining a sealed clinical record first, which is a separate matter with its own statute, and which is the thread I intend to start pulling this afternoon. She capped the pen. Mr. Dupree, I'm going to say something, and I want you to hear it exactly as I mean it, which was not warmly. All right, you did not survive this hearing because you're sympathetic. You survived it because a 63-year-old woman on your street filmed 4 minutes, 16 seconds, and handed it over uncut. Because your daughter wrote down the date, a man asked her which road she drives on, Zolzin. She stacked the pages. And because the man who rented you gone could not resist putting his signature under the same 11 words he'd already filed without one. He didn't lose because you fought back. He lost because he wrote it down. Brennan Treadway showed up in the Bell and Hollow parking lot following Monday at 5:20 because Rosalind's car wouldn't start and Sislis had to come out with cables. No gloves, no friends, hands in his jacket pockets. You need to get away from here. I know she's inside. I came at closing. I checked. That's not better. No, he said. I guess isn't. Silas set the cables down on the asphalt. They played the whole thing at the gym. The owner got the full 4 minutes off somebody. Called everybody in on a Tuesday. Brennan's jaw worked. Then he turned the lights on and asked if anybody had anything to say. 26 guys. Nobody said one word. Then he told me I was out, not suspended. Out, in front of the whole room so there wouldn't be a version going around later. And the sponsor took the banner down, didn't call. I found out because somebody sent me a screenshot with a laughing face on it. Silas waited. The young man took his right hand out of his pocket. A manila envelope, folded over once, sweat marked at the corner. He set it on the tailgate. Summer I was 17, he stuck me in the dispatch office. Said it'd teach me the business. He swallowed. They run 2 systems. Everything's digital now. But the drivers still write it in a book out in the yard, and somebody keys it in Monday morning. And the book goes in a box. Storage room, behind the water heater. 40 boxes back there. Nobody's opened since I was in high school. Silas felt the floor of the entire autumn move. He deleted the digital. I don't know that. I'm not saying I know that. But those 3 days aren't in the system, and I heard him on the phone in March saying the word scrubbed, and then he got up and shut the door. He tapped the envelope. Unit 2214. Soft pedal, low return. Name on it, date on it. And a second line underneath in different handwriting, saying what? Wrote it. PM Monday. Neither of them spoke. Why? Silas said. I don't know. That's not going to be good enough. I know it's not. You want me to say I'm sorry? I'm not going to. You'd hear it and you'd know it was for me. Then say the true thing. Brennan stood there a long moment. There's a guy in a chair. I never once thought about him. Not one time all summer. He was a think, my dad said on the phone in the other room. He looked up. Then the lights came on in that gym and 26 guys wouldn't look at me. And I went home. And my dad asked how it went, and I said fine. And he said good, and went back to his laptop. He stepped back. I'm not doing this for you. I don't like you. I don't think I ever will. All right, but that's the book. Silas read it that night at the kitchen table with the overhead light on. 3 pages photocopied, skewed on the glass, blue ballpoint on a ruled log sheet. Underneath it, in a different hand, pressed hard enough to dent the paper. Wrote it PM Monday. He put his hand over his mouth because it was so small. 9 words and a man's spine. He went into the office and peeled a yellow sticky note off the lid of the box, where it had been sitting since the 14th of April, with 1 word on it in his own handwriting. 3. He balled it up and dropped it in the trash. He could have written the report. He had all of it, 1 day ahead of deadline, and nobody in that office would have questioned a single line. He sat at his desk at 6 in the morning with the cursor blinking and thought about it for 90 minutes. Sign it. You earned it. Not a metaphor. They put you face down on your own street, and then they went into your medical file. And that is the problem, because that is exactly what it will say. He got up and walked up to the window. 22 feet of ruined lilac. If he signed it, then for 20 years there was a version of this story in which a man humiliated on his own lawn used a federal file to settle it. The version would be wrong, and it would not matter that it was wrong, because he had just spent 6 weeks watching 15:51 seconds beat 4 minutes and 19. But that was not the main thing. The main thing was smaller and took him until 7:30. This file is not yours. It moved in next door, and you started thinking of it as fence, and the man on the sidewalk, and your daughter's hand on the concrete. It is not the fence. It is a 15-year-old man who wrote 9 words in blue ballpoint on a Friday morning in February and got in the truck anyway, because he would have felt stupid. Sign it, and you have made his crash about your summer. Silas Dupree filed a voluntary recusal at 8:34 on the 13th of October. Full transfer to an independent panel, every document. The 3 pages, the composition book from the kitchen drawer, 9 pages of findings, and then a refusal to issue any of them. Then he drove 22 minutes to Ashgrove and went up a ramp with handrails on both sides. You've got a face on you, Wendell Pryor said. Silas sat down in the recliner without being told, which Wendell noticed and did not comment on. I recused myself this morning. Why in the hell would you? Because it's yours. Silas leaned forward. I've been carrying it like it was mine since July, and it isn't. If I sign it, in 4 your stories is a man who had a fight with his neighbor. You'd be a paragraph in the middle of it. I told you no. I know what you told me. He set a card on the card table. That's a lawyer here who doesn't take money up front, and a fund out of a drivers association that covers neuro rehab. It isn't big. It isn't fast. It will not be as good as what you've got. Wendell looked at the card. But it isn't from them, Silas said. The room was quiet a while. You asked me in July, was I doing this for you or for me? I said I didn't know. He stood up. The answer's for me, and I've been angry at you since September for something that was mine. At the door, Wenzel said, they'll want the yard book. They've got it. How? The son brought it to me. Wendell sat there about 10 seconds. Well, I'll be damned. He turned the card over in his big hand. Don't make him a good guy. People love to do that. Manta does one right thing at the end, and everybody wants to hand him a plate. He's not getting one. Good. And quieter. But he did bring it. The panel took 5 weeks. Silas was not part of any of it, which was the point, and which was harder than he had expected. Treadway Carthage was struck from the approved carrier list on the 14th of November. The evidence referral went out that week, and a second one behind it out of Calloway's office. The board voted Hollis out on the 21st. His name came off the letterhead in a software update, and that was the whole ceremony. Brennan bled down and got probation in 200 hours. And on the last Tuesday in November, Wendell Pryor gave a statement with a lawyer beside him, and a recorder running for 2 hours and 40 minutes. Silas sat in the back, not as an investigator, as a man in a chair. At the end, a panel member asked the question the room had been circling all morning. You declined in July. What changed? Wendell looked at his hands, then up. I want to answer that careful because I know how people say it about men like me. They say a man got bought, his jaw set. Nobody bought my silence. My silence was never for sale. I'd have told you every word in April if anybody had come out and asked me in April. He tapped the arm of the chair once. What they bought was my legs. That's a different transaction, and I want it written down as a different transaction. Nobody spoke. 16 weeks of therapy. That's what stood between me and getting myself out of a bed for the next 30 years. And a company paid for it and never said one word to me about my mouth. Because they never had to. He looked around the table. Y'all think somebody comes to your house with an envelope. Nobody comes with an envelope. He let it sit. They just fix your ramp. The lilacs went back in and on the last Saturday in November, which is the right time whatever the garden centers tell you in April. Forktal crossings had broken in July. Those came out. The rest got cut back hard, which Rosalind made him do, and which physically hurt him to watch. That's 12 years of growth. Cut it, or it comes back crooked forever. He cut it. Under the broken ones, the roots had held. Not just held, spread. Thick as a thumb where they came off the crown, running under the fence line into ground. Nobody had watered on purpose in 3 years. How is that possible? He kicked them apart. He kicked the part you can see. Brennan came to the fence at 4:30. The moving truck had been in the driveway since Thursday. Can I ask you something? That last one, on the ground. His voice was flat. You had the shoulder and the elbow and about 4 pounds of pressure between me and 8 months of rehab. And I wasn't tapping and you knew it. That's true. So why didn't you break it? Silas looked at him. I'd already won by then. Brennan waited for the rest. There was no rest. You won when? Silas didn't answer. So Brennan looked past him, out across the yard to where a 19-year-old woman was kneeling in turned earth with a trowel in her right hand, the hand with the pink scar across the palm, packing soil around something that looked like a bundle of dead sticks. She was not looking at either of them. She was working, and Silas watched it arrive. Watched him finally understand that the man across the fence had never been talking about the fight. That the winning had happened in a kitchen at a table, 19 days after a cookout, when a man said I was wrong out loud to his own child. Brennan nodded once. Short, the way men do. Then he walked back toward the truck. The light went at 5:15, all at once, earlier than you'd swear it did the day before. Rosalind clipped a shop light to the fence, and they finished the last 2 crowns with their breath showing. At 6, she pressed her palm flat against the soil, scarp side down. Dad, did you break your promise to Mom? Silas sat down in the dirt beside her. He thought about it the honest way. It took a while. For 3 years, I thought the promise was, stay quiet. That's what I wanted to hear. It was the easiest thing anybody ever asked me to do. He turned the trowel over. She asked me to let you know me. I turned that into a locked drawer and called it honoring her. Dad, I didn't fight that to prove I could put him down. I was walking to the car. I did what I had to do to keep you off that concrete a second time. He set the trowel down. And somewhere in the middle, I finally understood the difference between those two things. I'm sorry it cost you a hand to teach me. Rosalind wiped her nose on her wrist and left a streak of dirt across her face. I don't need a perfect father. I never once needed that. I don't care about the drawer, and I don't care what's in the envelope, and I don't care what you did on some road. She pressed her hand into the soil. I need one who stops hiding. That's the entire list. Silas did not have a speech for that. He would have needed one 4 hours long. So he nodded. The kind that meant more between the two of them than most things either had ever said out loud. And she saw it, and that was the whole conversation. She carried the shop light in a few minutes later, and the kitchen window went yellow behind him. Silas stood at the end of the row by himself, 12 years cut back to stubs and raw white cuts. It would look worse before it looked like anything, and there would be 10 weeks where anybody walking past would say the man let his wife's garden die. Underneath, where nobody could see it, roots running out sideways into ground. Nobody had watered on purpose in 3 years. Holding, he picked the mug up off the fence rail. Cold. Skinned over. He poured it into the dirt at the base of the nearest lilac, the way he had every morning for 3 years, and laughed out loud. One note, surprising himself, the sound going out over a quiet street where nobody was awake to hear it. Then he went inside, where the light was on and his daughter was already talking to him before he got the door shut.